Hi G Session viewers, my name is Alyssa Kritzman and I'm the design director of the G Project. For those of you who are new here, welcome, and those of you who are coming back for more, we're so excited to have you. The G Project is a public art campaign focused on dismantling negative ideas about immigrants. And the way that we're doing this is by inviting people to tell their own stories and ask the big question, what is your G status? So the G status really identifies your generation. For example, mine is G1 on my father's side, and I'm a G2 on my mom's side. This means that my father came from elsewhere, and my mom was born in the United States, but her parents came from elsewhere. Through each session, we've invited different guests to accompany them with a personal artifact, piece of music, they can recite a poem, anything that really conveys their own story and heritage. So this season, for season 3, we've invited previous guests to actually be the host and invite their own family members or circle of friends, colleagues, whatever they may be, to them to interview them. And this month, during March, we will be celebrating an all-female lineup to empower and encourage women to tell their stories all month long for Women's History Month. So I hope you tune in every Wednesday at 4 p.m. And at the end of this video, my colleague Richard Pelzer will give you some information as to how you can follow us and where to keep up with everything that's going on. So I hope you enjoy, and without further ado, please welcome our next guest.
Thanks, Alyssa. I'm Tamecca Seril, and I'm your host for today. I was featured in season 2 with Richard, where I shared that my status was a G status of infinity because my mother is Native Hawaiian. Today, I have the pleasure of interviewing Nakia Hicks. She too is a mom from Harlem. Hi, Nakia.
Hi, Tamecca. How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk to you today.
Likewise. I'm surprised we don't even know each other beforehand. So I'm interested in learning more about you. I've heard that we have so much in common, that we're both boy moms,
Yeah,
and collectors and curators. Tell me more.
absolutely. So I started my passion for art started many, many years ago. I'm classically trained to sing opera, and I've been in theater for much of my younger life.
Wow.
So the arts at large have always been just a really important part of who I am. But there was always this one aspect for me that just was unsatisfied. I've always wanted to be a painter. And so I would try to draw, to paint, to sculpt, and just unfortunately that part of my brain just doesn't connect. So what I had done was I spent a lot of time just kind of falling in love with the artists that are able to kind of take those passions and have that wonderful God-given talent of being able to make something out of nothing. To be able to take a vision or something that they see and take their hands and make this thing and bring it to life. And so in college, my undergrad is art history. And that's where I found my specialty and my real love, which is kind of odd for a girl from Harlem, but my specialty is 17th and 18th century French art.
Okay.
Yeah. And so from there, I went to college I went to grad school. And I studied what's called museum studies. And so it's a museum studies program with City College. It's the only program in the country that does half-time at the Met. And then the other time, in some of the smaller museums around the city. And so I got my formal education there. And since I've spent a lot of time in museums, I am a board member of Crawl Harlem, which is based here in Harlem. And it's an art support organization. And so this Crawl Harlem spends time supporting galleries and producing and curating events. We just did something this past winter. It's called Boundaries and Connections, and that's our kind of our tentpole. That's our banner exhibition series. This year, we're going to be doing another residency. So I'm ensconced in art, and then professionally, I'm an entertainment publicist. So I have always, and I've been an entertainment publicist for the past 15 years. First, I worked for myself. Then I became the vice president of publicity at Atlantic Records. And then I left to work for artists directly again, because it's always my passion to work with them directly and help them shape their brand. But my life has always been punctuated by art one way or another, whether I'm performing, I'm supporting artists, or celebrating and spotlighting artists. It's just kind of always the space that I've allowed myself to be in.
I actually really want to be selfish and ask like a ton of other questions related to your background. I mean,
Sure.
It's so impressive. I even want to chop it up and ask you, have you seen that documentary, Made You Look? The one about the art fraud that's airing on Netflix right now. I just watched it last
I have not seen that.
You gotta watch it. I would love to hear your impressions of what you think of it. But nonetheless, I mean, again, that's super impressive. I think any artist that comes in contact with you has found a jewel and an asset in you, especially your background in as a publicist. That is an amazing advocate. And I think for so many visual artists especially, that's exactly what they need, is that person that can help them to tell their story. And with that said, I think this is a good segue. Tell me more about your story, specifically your G status.
Absolutely. So my G status would be 3. Okay. My great-grandmother, both great-grandmothers are from the West Indies. One is from Barbados. Well, I guess you would call it the Caribbean. Sometimes there's always this debate, depending on the island, what it is. So it would be the Caribbean in the West Indies. One is from Trinidad and the other's from Barbados. And so they came over when they were in their 20s, alone as independent women. They got on a boat. They landed on Ellis Island and they began to create their lives. So my grandmother, mother, and myself are born here. So I guess that would be my 3. Did I calculate that correctly?
I think so. So you said your great grandmother, right? Not your grandmother.
Yeah, my grandmother. So that would be 3. Yeah. So we are from the West Indies.
Where did they go when they got from Ellis Island? Did they go to the Bronx? Did they go to Brooklyn?
You got it. Went to the Bronx. And as I mentioned, my grandmother, I'll go with my maternal grandmother. She came over from Barbados by herself, so she was able to kind of get her footing here in the country on her own as an independent woman. She sewed and was a domestic for some time. And then she met my great-grandfather and they had 9 children. And what's important about that as it relates to my own story is that it's a family very much ensconced in art. Everyone plays in my family. Everyone plays an instrument. Everyone sings. I went to what's now called LaGuardia, but the High School of Music and Art and Performing Arts. And my uncles before me, my great uncles, they attended LaGuardia. At that point, it was music and art as well. As I mentioned, everyone plays an instrument, sings, writes. And so it's an art-driven family. And so it's all very close to home.
Is your maternal grandfather American or also Caribbean?
My maternal grandfather is from, his mother's from Trinidad and from Montserrat. So he's West Indian also.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And do you still, cherish your Caribbean heritage? Are you one of those people that, makes rice and peas? And
not only do I make rice and peas and cherish my heritage over COVID, because I do work in entertainment and because the industry at large had been shut down, I pivoted and began to private chef. And some of the things that some of my clients would request would be West Indian dishes. So I just, I make my own curry, I make my own jerk sauces, and I spent much of that time because I wasn't able to really work. And I mean, obviously I still had clients, but they weren't able to tour. And we weren't really able, there were no live music events. And as you know, artists generally make money these days from touring. So that slowed down. It didn't come to a full halt because unfortunately, a lot of my artists are in Atlanta. So they just kept going. They didn't experience COVID like the rest of us. So there was still, so there were some projects that were still happening. But by and large, I did chef. And I still cook. And I grew up in a West Indian household, and it's very, I see the differences. I can tell down to my jewelry selections, how my earrings are really tiny because West Indians are very understated. It's unless you're Jamaican, this sounds so stereotypical. I'm so sorry. I'm about to, Jamaicans tend to be, you get the image of the dance hall. So and you know, during Carnival, it's lots of colors, but generally, West Indian women in my family, I'll personalize it to stay. West Indian women in my family, very understated. So my earrings are very small. It's not a lot of flash by any means. It's all very simple. And I see that woven through, you know, I think I'm 43, and you remember in the 80s with school days and the big door knocker earrings, I was not allowed to have any of those things. I could, you know, I was buying sneakers the other day, and I said to the young lady, she's like, "Oh, you've never had a particular kind of sneaker?" And I was in my mind, I'm like, I didn't know. We didn't do any of those things. It was very like, you know, most people from the Caribbean and West Indies can just say that it's, you know, it's just very conservative.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. I would say that, you know, we can look to two major examples that come from your background, and that's Riri and Nicki Minaj. And it's interesting that you mentioned your Trinity background. Just this weekend, I was here in Brooklyn, and I had bakes and doubles.
Oh,
and always mistaken for being Trini and Guyanese. And I'm like trying to fake the funk all the time, like, no, you know, trying to just keep up. And so my sisters were here visiting me from Philadelphia. And so one of them is obsessed with all things Trini, all things Trinidadian food. She jokes about how her next husband's going to be Trinidadian and how she's going to be, you know, soaked in curry. And I'm like, okay.
Hilarious.
I was like, be careful what you ask for when you ask for that Trini husband. But it's wonderful food. I agree with you in many ways that oftentimes Caribbean women are perceived as being more conservative. And I think that in this new generation, though, we're seeing a different kind of outlook with Riri and with Nicki Minaj that we hadn't seen before, except with the exception of, as you mentioned earlier, with Jamaican, with the Jamaicans in terms of like dance hall and the music and their version of Carnival.
Right.
And then with regards to your paternal side, would you say that they're very similar to your mother's side? Are they equally as artistic, or are they more like into other vocations and trades?
My father's side, my father's family is actually African-American.
Okay.
So they are, I mean, I guess they have been, they've been here since they were brought over. And ironically, from North Carolina. And interestingly enough, to this day, my father and my uncles who left New York City to go back to North Carolina when my grandparents moved back, they still live in the very same town that their family was slaves in. Wow. And they've never left, which is so interesting to me. But because I was raised in my mother's household, I've had this really interesting but really rich experience of being able to fully understand my West Indian upbringing and those things. Those are the things that are foundations to me. And then as it pertains to my father's family, I see the deep, rich African-American heritage. And I know that and speaking of that, I wanted to share my heirlooms just because I know that time is going to wrap up. And so the reason, this is a photo of myself, my mother, and my grandmother. Okay. And the reason why that's really, let's see, the reason why this is important to me, I've had this picture with me. It has gone to college. It has traveled with me when I've lived in every single state. And while there are tons of photos of us, the reason why this was super important to me is because I think it really encapsulates my experience. The two of them, my mother and my grandmother, are flanked, each of them to the sides of me like the Twin Towers. And that's very much what my experience with them as my I guess as my forerunners, but then also with women of color. In my experience, my generations have been women who really support each other and stand by one another. And I felt like that really was a visual representation of, I think, most people's familial experiences, if we're fortunate to have family members that are flanking the sides of us and kind of holding us up and making sure that we are representing not only our families, but ourselves in a way that is empowering and beautiful. And one other thing that I have to share, because I thought this was really powerful. In the last exhibition that we did, this was a piece, it was a 2-part series, but if you see the gentleman in the middle, this was taken from a photograph of 2 sharecroppers. There was a husband and a wife. The photo was separated. And I bought that because it really does bring us back to our roots, to the core of our generations. That, you know, as we go forward, especially in Harlem, where I'm from, where I've always lived, we are familiar with the Renaissance, and we're familiar with all these amazing art things that have sprouted from this fertile ground, but it has an origin. It has a generational origin, and that is this gentleman, on the red clay of Georgia, where this photo is from, are the ancestors and the generations before us that paved the way and gave us the freedoms to move.
Artwork, there's always some provenance, and we have to know that. Like, what's the origins of it?
Absolutely.
So what else is next for you? What can folks look forward to seeing from you in the coming months and years?
Absolutely. So Crawl Harlem is an organization that is extremely dear to my heart. I am on the board, and I'm also a part of the renaissance of the organization. It's in its inception, it was created as a arts support organization. They did trolley tours. So the old logo was a trolley. And what it did was it would take tour groups to the different galleries. And so now in the new iteration of Crawl Harlem, we are producing curated events. We're producing residencies. We have another one that's happening this year. We're going to be hosting upwards of about 5 or 6 different artists. Last year we did 2. So we're ever growing, ever expounding. And I would encourage anyone watching this to please definitely take some time and support the arts. And so my heart and soul is in Crawl Harlem. We're online, we're on socials as Crawl Harlem. And please visit, take a look at some of the things we're doing, look at our calendar. And if you are a lover of arts as I am, donate.
Perfect. Well said. So is that the best way for folks to reach you, is through Crawl Harlem?
Absolutely. My information is there. And I'm not a big social media person, but I am Nakia Hicks on socials. And so you can find me there as well.
Well, thank you, Nakia. It's been so great learning about you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
Wow, what a great story. Thank you very much for sharing. My name is Richard Pelzer. I'm the Director of Communications and Marketing for the G Project. As Alyssa Chrisman mentioned in the beginning, we are a public art project. I would love to invite everyone to our website, which is gproject.org. And I ask you to please sign up for all of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and now this new YouTube channel. If you are new to our YouTube channel, I ask everyone to please subscribe right there below. And we would love to actually hear any comments. So please catch us every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new story. And we ask you to please share your project. And we ask the question, what is your G status? Thank you very much for watching. We'll see you soon.